Salutations, everybody. It is Maddie here today, and we are sitting down to talk about the scariest game of the year, and that's Aura History Untold. I say scary because I have a little story to tell you to open things up. You see, when I played Civilization for the first time with Civ 5, it was when I got my first ever gaming PC. I was around 18 at the time, and I distinctly remember when I fired up Civ 5, I blinked, 18 hours of my life were just gone like that. I was completely addicted and hooked, played it all day, all night, and my life blinked, and it was gone. I was like, this is a dangerous game. And mind you, this was at a point in my life where, 18 years old, college student, I had a ton of free time. I could do whatever I wanted at that point. And I uninstalled the game immediately. It was like, okay, I have to be more careful with games like these. And then marches along Aura History Untold. It's exclusive to the PC. It's being published by Xbox Game Studios. I'm like, look, I cover a lot of Xbox, so I do want to check this out, but this does look like one of those dangerous games. And yeah, it is helplessly addicting, and I've really enjoyed my time with it. So I'm excited to tell you all about it here today. But before we begin, a quick word from today's sponsor. In 2021, Shin Megami Tensei 5 was one of my top 3 games of the year. I absolutely adored it and recommended it to anyone who loved JRPGs, and especially ones with a challenge. All these years later, we get Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, which I also talked about here on the channel and loved. And so when Sega reached out and said, hey, there's a sale, do you want to let your audience know about it? I went, of course. So right now, Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance is on sale on Steam for 30% off from September 19th to September 26th. If you're looking for a challenging, punishing JRPG with extremely rewarding gameplay, then SMT 5 Vengeance is absolutely up your alley. While the series is known for its difficulty, there's a lot of strategies that you can deploy that'll make life a lot easier for you, whether it be party optimization, fusing demons to get an even stronger party, leveling skills, abilities, and so on. Plus, there's a fantastic story to boot, especially with Vengeance and the extra choices you can make. It's always been known for morally great choices, and you're going to be making even more of those. It really is the Big Brother serious version of Persona, if you will. So check out SMT 5 Vengeance. Is on sale right now, again, from September 19th to the 26th, and shout out to Sega for sponsoring today's video. All right, so Aura History Untold is a game you probably look at and right away get pretty intimidated by it, which I get, and I think is totally fair because these games can be complex and never-ending tutorials, and trust me, I clicked on a menu at one point and saw the codex of tutorials. There's a lot here to unpack, and as I continue to play it, I continue to learn more, and there's no doubt that there are things I still don't know about this game. But as I continue to play Aura History Untold, that's what makes every playthrough brilliant, is just peeling back an extra layer. I will say this for beginners, because I do want to tune in that direction. I may as well be a beginner myself. I'm not an expert of this genre, and I ran away scared with my tail between my legs all those years ago and really haven't touched it since. So I'll just say this. Number one, the game allows you to have tutorials on with a lot of visual identifiers to kind of point you in the direction of like, here's what you click to activate this. Here's when you do this. And the game does a really good job of walking you through all of this if you feel like you need it. Otherwise, you can turn it off. Also, this game has a ton of difficulty settings. Like there are, I think, 5, 6, 7, 8 other difficulties above just the normal difficulty. I will recommend this. I played on normal for my first playthrough and I got bounced pretty quickly. I recommend just going one tier below that if you're newer or returning like myself and just feeling things out. There's no doubt there's a huge gap between these two in the forgiveness it grants you, and certain mechanics it doesn't really have you paying as close attention to, but it feels fine-tuned and well-tested for those who want to get super complex, super deep into the thick of things and get the best challenge out there, but also for people like me, we're getting back into the thick of things. Don't be too scared. I think the game does a really good job of walking you through some things and neutering the difficulty if you ask it to. Certainly, my second run through as Venezuela went way better than playing as George Washington and trying to rebuild America. Because yeah, what happens in this game is there's a prestige system. So as you complete all these different tasks on the map, whether it's like rebuilding a monument or building something that's really progressing your society forward, a lot of these actions you take will net you some prestige. And this is how the game ranks you on the scoreboard. And for those who are ranking low on the scoreboard, they will be forgot to time itself. So what happens is as you start to expand your empire, if you will, and build things out, others who are floundering are eventually going to get booted from the game, which gives it this real kind of game show feel where it's just like do or die. And like whoever makes it now, when it's just 6 nations, there's a lot more room for us to grow and fight over territory. So there's this kind of, I feel, incentive to go to war in this game more than I personally experienced in my brief, distant time of civilization. I also think that Art History Untold looks really good in that I love how I can zoom in and see the civilization quickly come to life. It's not like I'm laying out these little pieces of a puzzle and gradually connecting them. You can look as far as close as you want, and as I've mentioned before, I'm not a big visuals guy, but there is a bit of a connection I develop to my civilization when I can zoom in and see them, say, celebrating the Stonehenge that I just built for Venezuela, and them going like, yeah, this is really awesome, and kind of getting to see all of the people I'm taking care of there. I also love that each city has its own like happiness meter, knowledge meter, its prosperity, its wealth, and you really have to nurture all of these because as they fall, this is going to impact production, and so you're going to want to go ahead and manage all of that, and there are amenities that you can get from the people working, and that's where it's all stitched together so well. Like, okay, I'm going to go to this bakery, I'm going to have them make bread because my people are starting to get hungry and we need more food. Oh my God, now we're running out of housing because our population's growing because people are getting happier, so now I have to quickly build a dwelling. And that's the thing the game does a really good job of, is you start to learn the trick to this game is trying to be one step ahead of where your problem lies. So for me, I was reacting to everything. And I feel like when you're reacting is when you're losing this game. So when I'm reacting to, oh, I have a population problem, I need more housing, or, oh, I don't have enough food, I'm going to quickly build that, even though it makes more sense to the long term to build this, that's where you get into a pretty sticky area. But what's also interesting is how you effectively utilize your leader. And there are a lot of leaders in this game, so there's a lot of ways to play this game. It's a little bit like Civilization. You have your government victories, you have philosophy victories, if you will, you have research, you have war, and all these leaders are kind of tailored to these various play styles and kind of boost you forward in certain ways. I particularly like to build around government because I felt like it started to limit my options in the research tree. And as you start to understand your leaders more, like, oh, I get an increase of like 50% build improvements if I go with like the leader of Venezuela, and now I'm going to build things for government and military quicker with this character. So I'm going to focus on those because that's going to ramp me up a little bit quicker compared to other leaders, where others are better for all military. And this is further fortified by the advisors you get. So these advisors can help you in a number of ways. They can help you with like your economic advisory. They can help you with things like war and determining how effective your forces are in war. They can focus on making masterpieces that can give you little prestige bumps. Again, it's that moment-to-moment decision making that makes all these games. And this game has you making a metric ton of decisions. These advisors can also guide your army, so there's that element there. And it's just a lot of trial and error. It's actually something I've been experiencing a lot lately in gaming. I just did my first playthrough ever of the first Dead Rising as someone who was, Xbox One guy at launch. I was introduced to Dead Rising with Dead Rising 3. Technically 2, but I got filtered by the game. But point being is that was a game that was really, I learned about trial and error. Like my first run was a disaster. I failed the main story pretty immediately. I got annoyed, but I came back and I was like, okay, I get this game. It's very arcadey and replayable, and I'm more knowledgeable for the second run. Whereas something like Art History Untold, yeah, my first run was bad. Like I got destroyed pretty quickly. I was the lowest ranked leader on the leaderboard by a considerable amount. It was demoralizing, and I came back at a lower difficulty. Now I'm in first place, and I'm like, yeah, this isn't necessarily validating, but it lets you get into the deeper parts of the game because Art History Untold is split up into multiple acts, obviously defined by the eras of technology. So as you research more through these games, you're going to evolve your technology, and you can choose to research all of it, or you can choose to go on to the next era of technology and leave those behind. This is where I think a more intimate knowledge of your leader and what you're building toward helps. But I think unless you have played these games a lot, you're going to be a little bit overwhelmed, and it's just better to go with, I think, a lower difficulty to get to those deeper parts of the game where I think they do a good job of keeping it narrow, where it's like, yeah, I do have a couple of members on the leaderboard who are right on my back. I want to stay in first place. How do I do that? And so just being able to see how the game evolves, like one step that you'll learn, and the game really doesn't communicate it to you at all, even as someone with tutorials on, is the way that your environments, the things that you've built, are going to evolve. Now, this is very much out of Civilization as well, where as you progress in eras of technology, like my farm isn't going to be the same farm from, the BC era. It's going to change. I'm going to turn into an irrigation farm. But that is something I think the game kind of expects you to find out yourself, is like, okay, you have now researched this technology that's unlocked irrigation farms, and then you want to go to those farms individually and level those up. And that'll cost you resources, which obviously is the whole other element of the game, is how quickly can you generate stuff so you can spend away. The other feature this game has is a rush system. So when you're selecting projects to build for your various cities, you're going to pick some of them. And if you're a character that generates a lot of wealth, this is great because you can spend a lot of money and just slim down the amount of time that it takes to make things. This also allows you to strategize further into the later parts of the game. Okay, I'm going to start setting up for making a lot of money by building hunting camps and then building mints. And I'm going to do a lot of trade deals with nearby nations. I'm going to have so much money that even though I'll be behind on building things in the kind of mid game, I'm going to be able to accelerate everything I'm building and get a lot done per turn and really rise up the ranks. So there's different ways to approach the game. It's a little scary in that way. There is, if you will, turn-based grand strategy combat in this game where you can engage in war. You can pillage nearby villages and take all of the loot from them. You can obviously attack nearby nations as well. But really what I love is the decision making that comes in some of the light storytelling that Our History Untold has. So I'm not going to sell it to you like a completely narrative driven game, but there is a level of reactivity here that I really adore, where events crop up and you'll make certain choices and that'll unlock new events down the line as well, where certain choices I was making were starting to open up different avenues down the line. This is where the difficulty can also be forgiving, because pretty much all of these choices you make, you'll start to pay less attention to the story, I noticed, and more to like, how does this affect my nation? Ooh, I lose 50 materials. I hover my mouse over that. I only have 51 materials, so I'm about to lose all my materials, and I get +1 in my relationship with this tribe. Or I walk away and I get increased security for my nation, but this tribe hates me afterwards, and I have to wait for them to engage with me again in order to get that relationship back up. It's in those moments that I think Our History Untold is at its absolute best, because it's really forcing you to make tough decisions. But admittedly, as you'd expect in the lower difficulties, those decisions aren't that tough. You can defer decisions or choose to respond later, and then you can allow yourself to recoup some assets like, that individual needs a horse. I'm going to go get a horse and make sure I have that horse. And so when they come back around, it's like, sure, here you go, because you were prepared for that. And that's what I think allows you to crawl deeper into the game's mechanics. For example, there are workshops, and they're making specific items that you'll need not only for monuments you want to build, but trade items. And so when I had someone approach me and go like, hey, we need wheels, I'm like, crap, I can make wheels, but I didn't update any of my workshops to actually go and make the wheels. So what I noticed is in the beginning of the game, I was very quickly just flipping through my turns, just like canceling all my idle units and next turn, next turn, next turn. And it was then I realized like, oh, okay, I can spend a lot more time in this turn fine-tuning, choosing what my characters are going to do, what they're going to be building, making roads between my cities so travel is easier, erecting new cities. Because again, without the tutorial, you realize like the shackles are off. And for example, the game doesn't tell you like, hey, it might be time to, your city cap just went up, go get a settler out there. Like in my Venezuela playthrough, the first one I was kind of off the rails on, I very quickly forgot to do this, and I was building cities way later into the game than I probably should have been. And again, it starts to unlock the potential of, okay, now I know I'm going to do that later. So I think this is a game a lot about just trial and error. You're going to go in, if you're like me, and you're going to get beat up a little bit, and that's okay. Like I talked about my preview with Our History Untold, which I played for, I think, about an hour's time. And I played as France, and I quickly got invaded by 3 nearby countries, and that was it. It was awful. Got the snot kicked out of me. And so I didn't have an experience like that here, but that's the fun nature of this game, is how dynamic it can be. And naturally, as you play on harder difficulties, a lot of alliances are going to form against you. Whereas on the lower difficulties, I had nations approaching me like, hey, we're going to just need like 3 pieces of metal from you. But friend, you get like 25 pieces of timber, you get 30 materials, and your relationship with us goes up. So how about that? Everyone wants to be your friend in the lower difficulties is what I would say. So yeah, I've really enjoyed my time with Our History Untold, and I find it very addicting. The question may be, Maddie, this has been an overall positive review. Do you have anything negative to say about it? I'll definitely say that, and I know this is kind of hard to avoid with these types of games, the UI is a little bit overwhelming. A lot of options just tucked around in every corner, where even notifications, like a tiny little exclamation point above one of my goals that I guess I reached however many turns ago and I had no idea about it. It does a good job of providing you of the need to know information on the bottom right where your next turn meter is. And as you cycle through all of these, they kind of let you know and adjust or react to all of it, but there's still hidden information on top of that, or things that the game just expects you to learn and take care of yourself. Things like I mentioned with the workshop and choosing things you're gonna make. There were times I was deep into games and I still had workshops making lithic tools when I had plenty of other technology and inventions for them to craft for me. So there's things like that. There's also just a little bit of next turn-itis that I fell into, where I was just sometimes Not sure what else I could do except next turn, next turn, next turn. And that could be down to a lack of understanding with the game. I'm fully willing to admit that. But I did find myself, even as I was understanding the game further, hitting some of those strides in certain parts of the game, particularly as I like approach the end of Act 1. Like, all right, let's kind of move this over the hump now and get to that next era of technology, because everyone's building things that take tons of turns, and I'm just kind of waiting and just having my scouts wander in the meantime, and I'm just doing busy work. The game does a good job of keeping you busy, but I think there are times that it lulls a little bit, and that would really be it, because this is definitely a game that if you've like played Civilization, I think what you see is what you get in that sense. And there are definitely things that separate it. I think visually speaking, the amount of leaders you have here, there's a lot to unpack with Aura History Untold, but no doubt it definitely falls for me in that bucket of like dangerous video game that I'm very selective of my playtime with, because I want to be careful and not get fully absorbed into it. They also have multiplayer, which I did not have access to during my review period because the servers were offline. However, during the multiplayer, you are able to have simultaneous turns. It can go up to 30 players. You don't have to wait around for a bunch of other turns. So that stuff is kind of nice too, but I didn't get to test that fully, but I wanted to make sure you were aware of it in case this is something you play with friends, or you plan on hopping in a multiplayer game, doing like a turn or a few a night, and then moving on. I've never played these games that way. I'm very much like a binger when it comes to these style games. But yeah, I enjoyed Aura History Untold. It is available in Game Pass, so I feel like if you're looking at this, you're going, I wonder. Maybe give it a try, because not only is it really good, but this is a good place to kind of feel out a new genre for yourself potentially, if it's not really up your alley, and see if it's something you discover you end up enjoying. I definitely think it's worth the swing, but let me know your thoughts on Aura History Untold down below. Other than that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.